Hello everyone. Finally I hear you cry, he's back. Yes, it is, it is today, it's Thursday the 2nd of August. Apologies for the confusion there. I actually recorded this yesterday on the 1st of August, and when I was trying to edit it yesterday early evening to upload it, I discovered that most of the sound had not recorded. So apologies, I'm re-recording it this morning for you, so I hope to get it up by certainly early evening UK time, if not before. So welcome. This is my little podcast on my life, the fibre arts and everything else. My name is Gerard or Peter or Boniface. I am a former monk and a former bus driver. I live in Abingdon-on-Thames in the south of England. And I live with my two cats, Toby and Bunty, who now that I've started recording may well choose to put in an appearance. You know cats, they will very much make their own mind up. Sorry about that. Speaking of cats, I just had a cat hair in my mouth. Apologies for that. So yes, sorry it's been so long since I last recorded. I told you previously that I have quite a serious ongoing employment dispute, shall we call it, at work, which has come to a head in the last couple of weeks, which has been taking up all of my time and effort and concentration, so apologies for not recording anything over the last few weeks. In fact, it has been impossibly hot here as well, so I'm not entirely sure that I would have been quite so upbeat, shall we say, if I tried to record earlier than I currently am. If I can just ask your forbearance, and for those of you who have been praying and for those of you who have been sending positive thoughts, I thank you all very much and would just ask that you continue doing that. It's everything is coming to a head now, and I'm hoping everything will be resolved in the next couple of weeks, but it is a very trying and difficult time. On top of that, sorry, that cat hair is still in my mouth. On top of that, my psychiatrist increased the medication, the level of one of my two medications, which has the positive side effect at night time of making me quite sleepy, but the negative side effects during the daytime of making me quite sleepy. To the point that on Tuesday I came home in about 4 or 4:15, and I thought I'll just have a lie down for a few minutes, have a not so much fall asleep, but just shut my eyes and relax. And I woke up at 9 o'clock the following morning. So that was I do feel a lot better for having had such a long sleep, but it is unusual to need such a long sleep. So that again adds into the whole mix. Moving on to better and happier things, we have had some new arrivals in the last month. First of all, I'll put in a photo of the relevant times. At the beginning of July, Wendy's granddaughter was born, Delilah Ruby, and she is absolutely beautiful, and Wendy is over the moon. Mother and baby are doing well, and everything has gone fine. So yes, we had great delight in welcoming Delilah Ruby, and Wendy made a blanket for her, which I wrote the chart out for her because she finds she can follow knitting patterns no problem, but when it comes to crochet patterns, she really struggles to follow them. So it's a lot easier for her if I convert the written instructions into a chart for her, which I did. And she worked on this beautiful grey, pink and white blanket, and it's absolutely beautiful, and she gave it as a present when the baby was born. So that's the first wonderful good news. The second news is that Jeanette at Willow's Shake Shop discovered the sex of her first grandchild, who is due in November, and he is a boy. So since then, she has been making a couple of things for the new baby. She is most of the way through making a little blankie dog and security blanket kind of thing, which I've been giving her tips and keeping her giving her the self-confidence to continue making it, and it's looking really good. So she's just sewn together the bits and pieces, and now she has to do the face. And when she's finished that, I hope to get a picture of it for you, and I'll pop it in here. I have just... Excuse me a second, there's something odd going on outside. I wonder if my flatmate's radio alarm has just come on. Excuse me a second. I knew he wasn't in the flat. He is Andy, my flatmate, is a coach driver, and he's probably just on his way back from Gatwick Airport at the moment with his coach. So he's obviously set his radio alarm. He was on late shifts earlier last week and late last week and the very beginning of this week. So I think he set his alarm and not turned it off. And it's that very peculiar moment, you know, you're in a locked flat and suddenly you start hearing voices and you think, am I going mad? But I've turned the alarm off now, so it's okay. So yes, so I have... Jeanette also asked me to make something for the baby, which I will talk about shortly in my finished objects section. But you'll understand why when I talk about it. And then finally, on Tuesday, the 31st, my youngest niece, Eve, gave birth to her first child, Ethan. And mother and baby are again doing extremely well. We have been very blessed with my family. I'm one of 7 children. I have 10 nieces and nephews, and now 11 great nieces and nephews. So we're a very large clan. That's 28 direct descendants of my parents. So, you know, quite impressive, really. Part of me just wishes that they kind of, you know, a joke's a joke. Let's just stop here now. We've got plenty for the next generation, but you know, families are what families are, and they will continue to grow apace, I'm sure. But yes, mother and baby are doing very well, and everyone is very happy. And I'll pop a photo in here for you. So those are the pieces of what I think is probably extremely good news, and I'm very happy to be able to share that with you. I am hoping to go up to Salford in the next month or so to meet the new baby and to see the family again. I haven't been able to go up, partly because of the surgery and then because of the situation at work, and I've needed to give all my energy and focus to first getting better and then dealing with this employment situation. But I'm hoping that in the next few weeks things are going to return to some semblance of normality for me, which will be fantastic. And part of that will include going up and seeing the family. My youngest brother, has in fact organised a birthday party at the end of September for my mother, who is 80 this year. And she's 80 the day before I'm 50. So he organised the party for her, then realised that my then youngest great-nephew, Alfie, was born on the same day, so he would be 1 on the same day that my mother was 80. And then realised, of course, that I would be 50 the day after my mother's 80th birthday. So he's decided to have a joint birthday party for all 3 of us, which is very nice of him. And my mother was a great Elvis Presley fan. I mean, possibly her sister is the only person who was an even bigger fan than my mother, but she was a pretty big fan. And so he's organised for an Elvis impersonator to entertain us that evening, so that should all be great fun. It'll be nice to see the extended family as well. We don't get together as often as we used to because everybody's grown up and everybody's married, so there are fewer kind of family events for the cousins and the aunts and uncles to attend now. It tends to be the families are kind of dissipating a little bit more, so it'll be quite nice to get everybody back together, perhaps for the last time. So that's something else to look forward to in just a couple of months' time now. So I think, without any further ado, I will start talking about my finished objects. I don't have any hand-finished objects at the moment. I have been doing some hand-finished, or some hand knitting and hand crocheting, but I've been also focusing on my knitting machine and getting to grips and really getting to be quite proficient in the various different techniques that I've needed to learn. So I'm feeling very comfortable with it now, and not just in what I'm able to do, but with the ease with which I'm able to make corrections and the ease with which I'm able to adjust patterns to make them the size or the the variation that I particularly want, including changing colours and mixing up designs and that kind of thing. So I think, first of all, I will talk about my cushion. This isn't quite finished in that I haven't yet sewn on the buttons that will hold the tabs together. The original pattern for this was for a 14 by 14 inch cushion insert, and I only have 20 by 20 inches, so I had to increase the width and increase the number of rows. And in doing so, I then discovered I wouldn't have enough yarn to complete the design, so I had to mix it up a little. But I followed the instructions to the letter, and this has been my complaint about. It's not a complaint as such, it's just the book that I'm using advertises itself as a beginner's book. And it is a very good book, and it's very good at the very beginning of the book in explaining all the different terms and all the basic techniques that you need in order to be able to knit, including the cast on, the bind offs, the increases, the decreases, colour changes, all that kind of thing. And they're all in there, and they're all very useful and have been very useful for me. Where I kind of feel let down by it, I suppose, let down is too strong a word. Once you actually get into the patterns, you go from the very basic no assumptions made to quite a lot of assumptions being made. And that may be legitimate if the book is aimed at hand knitters who are going to make moved over to a knitting machine. And because I have been a hand knitter and have moved over to a knitting machine, it has actually not been impossible for me to make those adjustments. But if I had come to this book with absolutely no knowledge of knitting whatsoever, and hoping to do my knitting with a knitting machine, which is, after all, not an unreasonable position for somebody to find themselves in, and it's not unreasonable to expect the book to be that basic that it will walk you through each design. I mean, one of the later finished objects that I've got in a moment, the pattern didn't actually tell me how many stitches to cast on. I had to read the pattern and then work backwards to know how many stitches to cast on in order to get to where the pattern was at the given row of the pattern. So it's little things like that. There are little details which are assumed, and it's not that they're. I think it's genuinely not that they're being left out by design. I think they are just genuinely being assumed by the author. And so I think if I were writing this book, I would probably take it back one level and give much more idiot-proof instructions, so that, because I'm quite a problem, my mind likes to solve problems, so I'm a problem solver by nature. I'm a mathematician by training, so I like working things out and I like deconstructing what I've got to see how it was put together, as much as anything else. But I can quite see that other people would really struggle. So I'm a little bit in two minds about the book. I found it very useful, but it's not been as simple and straightforward as I would have hoped it would be. And I can't give an unequivocal recommendation for it, because it will very much depend upon the existing level that the reader actually has before they get involved. And a good example of that is I followed the instructions to the letter, and I have a button band which is inside out, because the way in which the design works on this is a slip stitch design, and I think, sorry about that, my phone just buzzed. This is slip stitch design, and I think you can see it produces this very nice kind of arrow effect going sideways across the cushion cover, and it only works on this side, which is the wrong side usually. This is the purl side. On the knit side, it's just a plain knit with the occasional kind of, you can see where slip stitches have gone behind, but they're not really showing up. It's just stocking stitch panel, really. But the way in which the button bands naturally want to bend is inwards towards the knit side, which if the knit side were the outside, it would mean that the button bands would therefore be on the outside and you'd be able to join them together and use decorative buttons and so on. But because of the way it works, in fact, the button bands are folding in at the top. So it's not a major thing. It just means that when I sew the buttons on, the buttons will fasten like that on the inside. I did say that I was making, I had to use a larger, I had to increase both the width and the length of the cushion cover because of the size of my cushion. And it meant I didn't have enough of the cream to do both sides. So I did this rather striking, I think, bottle green stripe, I suppose I'd call it. This is the West Yorkshire Spinners Essential DK. This is 100% wool, but it's a wool blend. It's not a single type of wool. I will need to wash it once I've finished it. I just put the cushion form inside so that you could get a sense of the nice bulk and the squidginess of it, which it is really very soft. I need to wash it and block it, and that will take away the kind of slight scratchiness that this wool has when it's not been washed yet. But overall, I think that's a very nice little design. It didn't take very long at all to work. I did find, it may just be my machine or it may just be the way I had the tension set up, I found that with the slip stitch, more than any of the other stitches I've done, it was inclined to jump. And so I was having to effectively tink back quite regularly in order to put right mistakes, but it wasn't an insuperable problem. I managed to correct it, and overall it does produce a very attractive texture on the front side of this cushion, and it really is quite a nice feel. So that's my first finished object. My second finished object, in fact, is a hand crochet, and this is, you may remember I was making the Blood Moon Cardigan by Not Bad, which is Vincent from, I think, Seattle. I've got Seattle in my mind. I'll double check in case I'm wrong, but if I don't put anything up, then it is Seattle. And he made a lovely, simple cardigan, which was basically a rectangle that was seamed in particular places in order to produce a kind of diamond cardigan. I didn't like, well, I liked the colours he chose, but they weren't really my colours, so I decided to use the sky blue and the green. And so I have finished it. Unfortunately, I didn't think about this while I was making it. He is quite tall and slim, and I am neither of those two things. So in fact, this doesn't fit me. However, it is very attractive, and I've just got to weave in some ends, but basically, this is the cardigan. And so, as you can see, those are the arm sleeves. He leaves it very much up to me how far along here to seam. I will probably seam it to about there when I've decided, but I want to talk to the person to whom I'm going to give it and see what they want. I've seamed the very edges, so that's a continuous thing. But I think overall it's a very nice, lightweight summer cardigan. Certainly enough on a cool summer's evening when we've had such hot weather that it's not really been appropriate anyway. But once we get towards the end of August and into September, the evenings will start to get darker earlier, inevitably, as we approach these autumnal equinox. So the evenings will still be pleasant, but maybe a little bit chilly around the shoulders. So I think it will be quite useful as a kind of evening wrap, almost. It was made using the Cloudborne cotton for the blue, and I used, and I can't remember if I've got it here. I think, no, it's not that one. Oh, I wonder if I have. Where might I have it? No, I can't find it. I thought I'd put it down here. I clearly haven't. If I can see it within arm's length. I think it is actually the same as this. Yes, it's the Waki from, no it's not, because that's the silk. No, it is one of the, sorry about this. It's one of the, no, it's not that one either. It's one of the Mirasol yarns, and the green is part linen, part cotton, so it's a lot tougher, which is good for the fact it's around the edge, and therefore is liable to get more of the kind of stretchy use, as it were. So it folds away very neatly into a nice rectangle, and it's quite light but quite sturdy. It's all treble crochets UK, double crochets American, throughout, so that it was a very mindless construction, which was quite nice for when I was listening to Audible or watching Netflix, about which more later perhaps. So that's a hand production, and I know it's here. There it is. And I made that using my 5mm. This is cherry wood by. I've not got my glasses on. Can't see the box. By Knittingberg, which I've talked about at length before, and it's a really, especially now that I've kind of smoothed down, not the rough edges, but having used it, it's a lot smoother at the tip, so the cotton flows very quickly over it. And I found it very ergonomic and very restful in the hand as well. So I can thoroughly recommend those handmade crochet hooks. So our next finished object, got plenty of finished objects. I'll show it in this order actually. This is a sample piece, which could basically be a dishcloth or a face cloth, which is made in a bit more of the cotton that was left over from the cardigan, the Blood Moon cardigan, using what's known as the tuck stitch or the pull-up stitch. And it's a very nice little cotton face cloth, and is equally nice on the wrong side as it is on the right side. I hope you can see this is a kind of diamond formation, whereas this is lots of little ridges, almost like a moss stitch, but not quite. It's very textured on both sides, so it would be ideal for washing either pots or personages. It's on the small side because I only had a little bit of the cotton. It does, as with most of the knitting machine items, it does, sorry, the refuse collection is going on outside, so hopefully they won't be too long. It does tend to curl up at the edges, and for some reason it told me to do 2 very loose stitches right at the end, which has produced this kind of fold over top. I'm not quite sure what that was about. Normally you do 1 loose row and then latch off, because it's easier to do it with slightly more material available to you, because otherwise it can get very tight and you end up pulling in at the top instead of it being horizontal. But overall, very nice, and that was my first attempt at this particular stitch. So my second attempt was this hat and scarf combination. And in fact, unlike the other hat and scarf that I made, this made the scarf first and then the hat. And it's a pair. So this is the scarf. I've not blocked it yet, so it rolls up at the sides, but it will block out to be quite flat. And as you can see, it's this lovely diamond surface effect. So the other thing about this is that I've not sewn in that end, I'll sew that in later. The other thing about this is that the fringes is actually I-cord, knit on the machine. So it just produces a slightly different effect from having tassels or the like. And that's the scarf. And then going with that is a hat. Or a toque if you're Canadian. I have Canadian family who live in Winnipeg, and they talk about toques all the time. And this is quite a nice hat. And again, it will fold down over the ears if I need it to. I made this, well, the pattern didn't go up to the large size, but I'd made a large size on another hat, so I knew how many stitches to increase it to. And I mentioned the last time that I didn't like the way the pattern finished off at the top, because in order to reduce bulk, they advised me to move every other stitch onto the next and then do that again, and it ended up with quite a lacy top. And somebody did ask in the comments on that video whether or not it meant me to then move all the stitches together, and I don't think it did, because it talked about reducing bulk, and I tried doing that on a smaller piece and it didn't significantly reduce the bulk unless you left that quite lacy edging. So with this one I only reduced it by half instead of by half again, so I just reduced it once and it was a lot better, and then I made this lovely thick pom-pom to go on top, and it completely hides the lacy bit underneath anyway. So overall I really quite like this design. There are lots of different ways in which this design can be made. The interesting thing about the rib at the bottom is it's not actually a true rib. If I show you, in fact, it's not, it's knit 3 I think, or no, it's knit 2, and then there's no knit at all between the stitches or purl. It's just, I wonder if you can see that, if I bring it closer, you can just see it's horizontal bars. And so it creates this faux rib. So I could have latched up each one individually, but as you can see there's an awful lot of them around, and it would have been quite tedious to do it, and I'm not sure it would have improved the look or the effectiveness of the rib. It's quite stretchy, as you can see. I have a large head. I do have a large head, so it fits me quite comfortably in the extra large size that I made, and I can adjust the size down for other people. Again, this is the Essentials DK by West Yorkshire Spinners, and this is in the lilac and this rather fetching kind of aubergine purple colour, as opposed to the lilac and slightly more pink of the first set that I made. So I'll pop those down there, and there's more. So having made the hat and scarf, I then was shown another way to do tuck stitch using a kind of lace setup, and I made this baby blanket, which I've made this, if I bring you can actually see it's separate panels. The panels are the same pattern, but the white, or the cream panels in this case, are slightly narrower than the grape panels. If I pull the stitch apart, you can actually see it's quite a lacy pattern. You can see me through it behind, but when it's relaxed, it looks quite textured rather than lacy. And the end panel I did on a much looser tension and folded over and then latched the panels together. And so I did it with the pearl bumps on the outside, and because it's a looser tension and it's slightly stretched, it gives it the appearance of being garter. To do garter on a knitting machine involves every other row lifting the work off the machine and turning it around. So you knit a row, lift the machine, and then do it again, and it's very complicated. Whereas this, which was part of the design, so that I don't claim any credit for this, just simplifies the process and produces a similar effect. Most of the people I've shown this to actually prefer the back of the blanket, which is fine. It's also very decorative. I made this one for a friend whose baby is due any time now in the next couple of weeks. Having seen this and knowing that she was having a little grandson, Jeanette asked me to make her one, but in a lapis blue and cream, which I will put a photograph of that in here that I took at the shop after I'd given it to her. They're all made using Stylecraft Special DK, which is 100% acrylic, and it is my go-to acrylic. I'm not a yarn snob. I love natural fibres and indie dyed yarns and all the rest of it, but for workhorse quality, I will always turn to Stylecraft Special. It is by far and away the best of the acrylic yarns, in my opinion. In fact, Wendy's baby blanket was also made using Stylecraft Special. So before I move on, I'll talk about some acquisition. Oh yes, I wanted to show you, I have it here. I thought I had it here for that purpose. This was the original hat that I made, which is just a striped hat with bobble, and you can see it's actually a different colour. So I've not simply made the same design, but they are very complementary. I love these colours, these purples and pinks and lavenders. When I was a teenager, I actually painted my bedroom walls lavender because I just find it a very restful, calming colour, which it is. And I made the pom-poms myself using my Clover pom-pom maker, which I like to make thick, firm pom-poms. This one I made two-tone, and this one is just plain because I actually ran out of the purple. So I had to. You do what you have to do, as it were. And in fact, it works because it's the same colour as the top of the hat, so it's a two-tone hat all the same. Before I move on, I know I'm jumping about and dashing here and there, but I've got a lot to talk about still. But I just wanted to say, Jeanette suggested that I make some more of these blankets, or of the pattern similar to these, that she can sell in the shop, because she sells handmade items in the shop. Wendy has sewed a couple of cushions and other items. There are bags and other items that are sold there as well. So I have decided that I will be making one of them in pink and white, one of them in yellow and white, and one of them in blue and white, all baby colours. So this blue is cloud blue, the yellow is lemon, and the pink is soft. Oh, they're calling it soft peach. It doesn't look peach. That's very much a pink. I wouldn't call that a peach at all, but it's anyway. It's what they call soft peach. It says so clearly on the back there. I think if you can see it. I don't know if it's in focus. It's difficult for me to tell. Is that in focus? I think so. Yes. There we are. Soft peach. With it being written backwards, it's just difficult for me to tell as to whether it's the right way around or not, in focus or not. And I've decided, actually, this is the cream, this is the white. As you can see, that it is slightly blown out there, but it's not too bad. So the white and the pink, I think, will go better. In fact, that looks more peach on the screen than it does in real life. And then the white and the yellow, and the white and the blue. So I will be working on those and getting those done, and I'm going to put them in organza bags, and they'll be sold in the shop, so if anybody wants to buy them. Yes, moving on to the next finished object. In fact, my last finished object, you'll be pleased to hear. Oh, and sorry, one other, I forgot about this. One other was this lovely raspberry and white. I quite like the peach and the grape, but I think the raspberry goes better with the white. And it takes 200-gram skeins of the colour and one of the white or the cream as a contrast. And that, it literally, you're left with maybe 3 grams of the colour and less than a foot of the white or cream. So the last thing I have finished making is a shawl. And I say I finished it according to the pattern, but I haven't finished it in that I may, because I have some of the yarn left over, a kind of lavender colour, I may put tassels on this. But this is a lace triangular shawl. And as you can see, it's actually knit. I hope you can see it's knit that way. So from the tip to the widest part using increases, and then back to the narrowest part using decreases. And it's a simple yarn over lace design. It's what they call plaited. So the front is this purple colour, and the back, lavender almost, and the back is this pink. You can see where there are joins here, and I'll probably separate those and weave those in as ends. It's also called for a third colour to be the stabiliser at the cast-on edge, or the the salvage edge, they called it. So you can see that this kind of lilac colour runs throughout the top on the back side. It's invisible on the front, and it's just there on the back to provide extra bulk and strength. I think, in fact, I used for this the Katia Menfis, which is Spanish for Memphis, the city in Egypt, because it's Egyptian cotton. And the colours 14 and 24, they don't have names, I'm afraid, so there we go. Non-poetic colours, but it's a really nice yarn. It was sold as a 4-ply, but I think it was probably slightly thicker. I think it was probably a sport weight yarn, which means that I should really have used a higher tension, because it's quite a thick fabric. Having said that, it's a very nice fabric, and I do have a couple of vegan friends who wouldn't wear natural fibres, animal fibres, but will wear plant fibres. So I think if I put a tassel, possibly, I think I'd probably put one on each of the 3 points. And that, for me, will just finish it off. It does look quite nice. Apologies for the microphone here. It does look quite nice. And I think would really work with a pin to hold it, so much less gathered around the neck. But it is quite nice. I've not blocked it yet, and once I've blocked it, it will stretch a little bit, because I need to open up those holes just to make sure that they're visible. And that's the basic pattern. That's the rear, as I say, and that's the front. So that's the last of my finished objects. Oh, gosh, that was tiring. Having said that, I do have a couple of works in progress. Well, actually, I have one work in progress on the knitting machine, which is another blanket pattern. This time it's a cable, and this is just a simple cable running up the middle, and the panel on either side is left unworked and then is latched as a purl row, so it's knit on the back side, and it's latched as a purl row, which just gives it that, pulls the cable into more relief. Again, the edges are curled over, but they will be unravelled and latched, and that's basically the width of each panel. And this will be, again, a contrast of four of these. This is Empire, again, Stylecraft Special DK. This is Empire, and this will go with Cream, so that's the cream. So those are the colours together. I'm not as... The cabling is really simple on this machine, because it's just a case of you use 2 tools, hook 3 stitches on each of the tools, and then swap them over, and as long as you're consistently doing the same direction, you end up with a proper cable. There are more complicated cables possible, and I may decide not to continue with just this simple cabling and may go for a more complicated pattern. On the other hand, it's a very attractive cable, so I might just finish off the design. This is using considerably more yarn, so it's going to use 2 of the colour and 2 of the contrast in order to make the end panels as well. But that's the first panel that I've done, and this was very quick. All of the panels, either the lace or the cabling panels, are very quick to make. What takes the time with this particular product is the latching of the 2 panels together, because that has to be done by hand, 2 at a time on each side. So it's, given that there are 300 stitches vertically, that's 150 latches with each colour, so that's quite a lot of time. But it's a very mindless and enjoyable task. You can sit back in your chair and watch the TV or listen to audiobooks and just carry on. I have my 2 stitch markers holding the 2 stitches that will be dropped when I've made the next panel, my 2 little Dalek stitch markers. So I do like my Doctor Who. The other work in progress that I have been working on, and it doesn't look as though I've done much, but I actually have done. I've not done much since before my operation. Because if you remember, when I was on a holiday in Scarborough, I started work on my elephant head. And I have done quite a bit, as I say. I just haven't done as much as I would have liked to have done since I had the surgery. So I've been focusing. This is my current hand crocheting that I'm doing. So I separated for the tusks the last time you saw this. So I've done the whole of the yellow band and the whole of this increase and decrease for the red. Now, the yellow band doesn't look like much, but in fact, there's a lot of shaping gone on in here, and you can see it's not simply a horizontal band. So there's a lot more work being involved in doing this than just simply going round and round as I had been before. Which takes a little bit of concentration, but isn't it not so much that you can't do other things, listen to other things, watch other things while you're doing it. And it's going quite well, and I'm nearly to the point where I need to use my head mount. I did try to get a solid one, but they didn't have any, but I don't think it's going to be a problem because it's really just about giving the kind of the shape and the strength on the outside. I don't think the inside is going to be particularly relevant. It may bulge a little at the back, but that's not going to matter particularly. So the head will be mounted onto this, and then there'll be a ring that's crocheted onto the top that you actually fix it to the wall with. So I'm nearly at the point where I need to start attaching that. So I hope to have a lot more progress to show you again next week. That's just a couple of days that I've been working, well actually just a day that I worked on that on Sunday. Because on Sunday I am a member of a local crafting group in Abingdon called Crafters in Abingdon. It does exactly as it says on the tin. Excuse me a second, I just want a drink of water. And once a month we meet together at a local community centre and we just sit and craft. And I actually took some of the machine knits along because I needed to weave in the ends, and then I took my elephant head along. So I worked on that for about 2.5 hours with them and got that much done. So I was quite pleased with what I've got done. I just need to start focusing in on and getting that stuff done because I want to get that on the wall. It's such a lovely, for those of you who can't remember, it will look something like this when it's done. So what I've got done so far is separate for the trunk and do this. I've done, so I'm working on the part that's about to incorporate the eyes, and then there'll be this front panel goes on the front of the head, and I attach it to the back panel, and then the ears, and then all the decorations and the trunk will come afterwards. It's a very simple, easy pattern to follow, although it looks quite complicated. Every step is very clearly laid out. Every instruction so far has been absolutely spot on. So I can thoroughly recommend the designer, if I get my glasses. And I'll tell you who the designer is. The designer is Vanessa Moonsea. As you can see, that's her name, Vanessa Moonsea. And I tell you that because she has done a book of animal heads, and assuming that the other animal heads are as clear and concise as the elephant head instructions, I can thoroughly recommend her as a designer. That what she writes in her patterns is exactly what you need to do in order to create her creations. So that is it for works in progress. I now come to some acquisitions. I mean, a lot of this week I've been spending quite a lot of money on, not a lot of money because it's only £2 a skein, but I've been spending my money on the Stylecraft Special because it's I'm going to be making the blankets in Stylecraft Special because it's an acrylic. I don't know if the people who are buying it might have some sensitivity to wool or other fibres. At the same time, I will put with them the idea that if they have a particular colour or a particular yarn that they would prefer me to use, if they want a cotton blanket or a woolen blanket, I'm quite happy to make the blanket to order. So I will put in the yellow, the pink, the blue, because those are the three kind of baby colours that, you know, boy, girl, or doesn't care, or don't know. I know we shouldn't be so limited in our view, but people are, so I just go with the market that you have, and it's up to people. If they want to buy a pink blanket for a boy, I am more than happy. I have lots of pink shirts, so I'm not... I don't buy into the idea that pink is for girls and blue is for boys. But for those who do, I'm quite happy for you to do that anyway. But equally, I'll be quite happy to make them in whatever colour and whatever yarn people like. Although obviously, if they want more expensive yarn, then the item will therefore be more expensive to buy, which I don't think would be an issue anyway. So I've been spending most of the money on the Starcraft. But whilst I was in Mason's yesterday, actually whilst in Mason's on Friday with Jeanette, as she was choosing her colours for her blanket, I saw that Mason's had got in some new cakes. I may have mentioned in a previous podcast that Debbie Bliss is no longer supplying local yarn shops, that if you want to buy her yarn, you have to buy it directly from her website. As a result of this, suppliers to companies like Mason's, to shops like Mason's, are offering alternative yarns. And there is an Italian company called Mondial, Mondial, that's their name, Mondial, have been stepping in and filling the gap. And I have a cake here, and this is it, and you can see it's got this grey going into blue going into white, which is a lovely kind of wintry ice effect. This is lollipop yarn. Unfortunately, its colour code is 836, and when I looked it up online, 836 is grey, blue and white. That's exactly what the description is. So they don't have a name, but work that out for myself. But that's the way it is. This is, let me just get this right. This is that 10%? I think it is. So this is, 75% acrylic. Well, actually microfiber acrylic, and then 15% wool and 10% mohair. And look at the lovely halo it has on it. Now there is a pattern for this particular scarf on the inside of the label, so I will be knitting that. I'm really, really, really looking forward to it. I cannot believe how soft this is. Obviously it's mohair, which helps. And it just says it is virgin wool, new wool, but it doesn't say what type of wool. It does feel very soft. I think it's probably even merino, but I don't know for certain because it doesn't actually say. And for the 100 grams, there are 280 meters, so it's a good length. It uses 5 to 6 millimeter needles, which I think still puts it in the DK category, but possibly veering into the Aran weight or the worsted weight category, the medium worsted rather than the light worsted that is DK. And it's got this lovely halo effect of the mohair, so it just feels fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to getting started with it. It's a centre pull cake, and I can feel the centre is there, so once I'm ready to cast on, I will be using this. So that's my lollipop, and this is actually very reasonably priced. It was at £8.99. I've looked online, and everyone else is selling it for £9, so I got it a penny cheaper. For 100 grams, including mohair, £8.99 is actually very good value, I think. So it's well worth looking at if your local yarn shop sells it, and if they don't, maybe ask them to do so. There are 4 different colours. There is one which is the most common one that they had in the shop, and is the most common I've seen online, which is this kind of lime green, and it's a little bit garish. And I think this is one of those occasions when it would really help if the supplier supplied a swatch of the yarn knit up, because I suspect that once you've actually got a full shawl of it, for example, in that colour, that lime green, which is so in your face because it's the outside edge, and so it's all you see on the outside as it's sitting there on the shelf. It can be very off-putting. If you're not a green lover, then that is going to be quite an overwhelming sight. And I suspect they would do better to even put that lime green on the inside of the yarn and then have the outside, the paler colour. But that's just something to be aware of. Yes. I have an acquisition on the desk. Those of you who follow me on Instagram will already have seen this. If I just turn the camera around, you will see over there is an overlocker. This arrived just on Tuesday. I have set it up, I have tested it and used it a couple of times just to get the feel for how it works and so on. I bought this because it will make the seams on my bags much more, give them a lot more strength. And it will also make when I have the home weaves that I make, it will give them, it's easier to secure the edges and also to seam it, and gives a much more robust finish for it. So I called my machines, they all have names. So my sewing machine is Dorothy. And so I've named my overlocker Judy. And 10 points for those of you who can guess the connection. I haven't yet given my knitting machine a name. But I think the name that keeps springing to mind is Martha. I don't know why, I just like the idea of Martha. So I think my knitting machine is Martha, Judy is the overlocker, and Dottie, or Dorothy, is my sewing machine. Yes, I am a very peculiar person. I appreciate I'm a peculiar person, but, you know, I am what I am. So I have a couple of fabric acquisitions. This, I think, is just the most adorable fabric. This is these wonderful sheep. I just love this. So I'm going to be making some bags out of this. I think I know several people who will absolutely kill to have bags made out of this. So I will be making a couple of bags. I just think even if I never use this, having it and seeing it makes me smile. It makes me happy. And isn't that enough anyway? But I will be making some bags out of that because I just like the idea of carrying a bag around that has that. Bob and Wendy went away to Devon for a week's holiday last week to stay with some friends, and had a lovely time. Lovely weather, which I will talk about at the end. And while they were there, they went to a fabric shop, and knowing my love of all things owls, they got me this. So again, I don't know what it is about these graphic designs. I just think they're so full of character. They just make my heart smile. So yes, I'm really looking forward to making something out of this as well. Any suggestions on what I may make other than bags? Gratefully accepted. I do have lots of pattern books, so there are lots of things I could make, and maybe I'll make some quilts out of that, because I just like the idea of those squares within a quilt or a cushion cover. And then we went to Cutting Edge Fabrics. You may remember I went to Cutting Edge Fabrics in Newbury on the day that I was taken into hospital, earlier that day. Bob took us on a magical mystery tour, and we ended up at Cutting Edge Fabrics, and I got some lovely fabrics. Well, they have another branch in another town called Camberley in Surrey. So Bob and Wendy were going on Monday and took me along, and so I was able to buy some spotty fabrics. These will be perfect for the linings of bags, which is what I've got them for. I've got lots of patterned fabrics for the outside, and I just felt I needed something simple but stylish for the insides. So I will be making the insides of bags with those. I just love polka dots anyway, but I love these colours too. They're very much my colours. So I do have one other acquisition, if I can find it. There it is. So It has been a difficult few weeks. I'm not going to pretend I've had an easy time of it. I mean, I've had it easier than many other people have in their lives, so I'm not going to say that, oh, woe is me. But it hasn't been an easy couple of weeks. And whenever I'm having a difficult time, I think I'm going to spoil myself. So I've given myself an early birthday present, let's call it that. And it is this. Now you'll be able to tell from the packaging immediately, these are higher needles. In fact, they're higher sharps. This beautiful cloth needle holder. And these are circular needles, interchangeables, going from, I believe, let me get my glasses because obviously the print is very small on these. These are, I think, 2 millimeters, they're maybe 2.5 millimeters. Let me just see. The light is reflecting off them, so I can't actually see them easily. Yes, there we are. I think is it? There may be 3.25 millimeters. I can't quite see the print. Maybe if I hold it on there, I'll be able to. No, it's too out of focus, isn't it? If I look down, I really can't see. Anyway, it's a bit annoying that I can't read those, but the light is just in the wrong place for me. It's reflecting off them, but they are incredibly sharp, and you can actually feel how sharp they are. These will be ideal for things like the mohair, because they do go up to, I think, a 5 millimeter. Yeah, these are 5 millimeter needles. So I have 4. Just open the pack at the back. I have 4 different sizes of cord, including the 16-inch. Now it's 16-inch including the needles, so that would be ideal for making a single sock or a single mitten or even a hat. And then it goes all the way up to the 40-inch. 40-inch. And the other thing about these is that you can actually, there are connectors in here that I can connect the cables to each other, so I can even increase them further if I needed to, although I don't normally knit anything that requires huge needles. And I just think this lovely rose packet is really nice. They're not cheap. They're not massively expensive either. They are very nice, and I've noticed a few people use them and swear by them. There are those who prefer the Addis and others who prefer Chalgu, but everybody rates the higher sharps as being very good needles. So I bought those for myself. So that's basically it in terms of acquisitions. I just have to thank Nina, who sent me a lovely little package a few weeks ago, and I meant to thank her on the video and then forgot to thank her on Ravelry, so I'm going to thank her on Ravelry whilst I'm doing this video. But she sent me a lovely little care package, including this beautiful handmade pouch. These beautiful crocheted squares are absolutely lovely, and then there's these lovely little kind of candid buttons along the top which open up, and inside is this beautiful flowery fabric and this lovely stitch marker of an owl, in flight perhaps, or is that's better, in flight or coming into land, but it's a beautiful stitch marker of an owl. So I was hugely touched by this, and she also sent me a bar of Kendal mint cake, which I love. When I was in the Scouts, we used to go into the Lake District and the Peak District hiking and camping, and we always had Kendal mint cake, and I absolutely love Kendal mint cake. It's a high energy food. It's a very sugary bar, flavoured with mint oils, and it's meant for walkers so that it gives you that burst of energy when you need it, when you're out in the cold. But I just love it anyway. It's just I was really very touched by that. It came at a very low point, so it really gave me a massive boost. So I'm very grateful for that. Now, I do have an announcement to make. Let me just get I've got them written down over here. I just need to dig them out for you. So bear with, bear with. I was given by, oh, and it's actually a whip, so I should talk about that as well. I was given by Hannah of the Cozy Cottage Crochet podcast a lovely pair of patterns, and she gave me at the same time the offer of a copy to two of you, which is even kinder of her. So if I just go to my group, I've got it. So I opened a thread asking, what do you most enjoy about crafting in the summer? And I drew a name from there, and the number that won was post number 10, which is Mo's Crochet. I love being able to craft outside and not have my hands freeze off. I do a lot of crocheting in the car, and during the winter it can take a bit for the car to be cozy enough to expose my poor little fingers, which is really nice. I unfortunately don't get to crochet in the car because I have to drive, but so that was the winner from Mo's Crochet, and she is from West Des Moines, Iowa, in the US. So I will pass through your details to Hannah, and she will send you a link to the pattern. And the other person who won, well, this is a little bit peculiar, if you like, because in fact, the person who won from the list of members was Hannah. I actually drew Hannah's number, which is just, I was quite pleased with that in one sense, because it was very funny. Let me just get the, oh, where are we? Sorry, I'll just open it up. I've got it written down on my computer, but forgot to, here we go. So I redrew the name, and the person who won that, if I just get down there, yes, so the original winner was number 72, the Cozy Cottage, which is Hannah. And then the actual winner is number 10, again, which is peculiar, but it's just the way it works, which is Cindy G. And if I just go to Cindy G's page, let me just click there we go, and members there. Sorry about this, just make conversation amongst yourselves while I find Cindy G's page. Here we go. And Cindy G is from Brainerd, Minnesota. And she won the other copy. So well done for your win. And Hannah, to thank you for your generosity, and because in fact, you did actually technically win, if you send me details of a pattern you'd like, I will buy that for you and send it to you on Ravelry. So congratulations to you as well, and thank you very much for your generosity to the podcast. I can say that I have started making one of the patterns, which is the wrap, and I have got this far so far. I'm actually making this in acrylic because I quite liked the colour, which is this lovely soft grey, silver they're calling it, which is the special Stylecraft Special 4-ply, because it called for a light fingering or fingering weight yarn, which is 4-ply by any other name. Whoops, sorry about this, my hook's got a bit caught, there we go. So it's a very simple pattern, and it's really very attractive. So as you can see, I've done the first band. I only hooked this on, I worked on this for a couple of days. Well, no, probably just a couple of evenings, actually, a couple of hours. And it's really quick to learn, and I'm really enjoying it. interesting enough because it's a several line repeat, but each of the lines is sufficiently different that it actually holds your attention, but not so much that you can't craft whilst talking or watching TV or listening to audiobooks, as I said before. So that's I'm really enjoying. So I hope that the winners enjoy theirs, and I will send your details through to Hannah and she will contact you. And Hannah, if you can contact me, I will be very happy to gift you a pattern of your choice. So that is it in terms of crafting. I do have a couple of things to talk about, both of which are weather related. We have been enduring, and I say enduring because it really has been endurance. We have been enduring our hottest summer for a very long time, actually probably since 1976. Now I have got some notes written down, but I can't find where I've put them. I am useless, I tell you. There we are. There we are, got them. So we've had a really cold end of winter in March. You may remember the beast from the east, and I know other parts of the northern hemisphere suffered equally bad weather. Well, for most of the last 2 months we have had, well, in the whole of the last 2 months we've had about 3 hours of rain, and most of that was in one evening. It has been incredibly dry, and for the last 2 or 3 weeks, not so bad this week, but certainly the 2 or 3 weeks before that, really hot temperatures. I mean, in the 30s temperatures, which is extremely unusual in the UK. And these two things are not unrelated. They're both caused by the jet stream, amongst other things. And you may remember I talked about the bulge that was causing the code snap. The jet stream is a kind of, if you looked down on the planet from above the North Pole, the jet stream would be a kind of wiggly edge running all the way around the southern part of the North Pole, the Arctic Circle, if you like. And normally the jet stream moves quite quickly, so we'll get a few days of heat and then a few days of cool and then a few days of heat, because you get these peaks and troughs of the hot and cold weather. And while when you're in the peak, you get the warmer weather because the weather's coming up from the south, but when you're in the trough, you get the colder weather because it's the Arctic air that's moving further south. So it's that kind of nice interchange. But this year, possibly because of climate change, but also because of melting ice caps affecting the oceans currents, the jet stream has slowed down considerably, which means that when you are in a hot spell, you stay in that hot spell. And when you are in a cold spell, you stay in that cold spell. So Iceland, which is 100 miles off the northern coast of Scotland, has had one of its coldest, greyest summers on record, at the same time as we're having one of our hottest and sunniest summers on record. And that's because between us and them, they're in this trough and we're in the peak. And the jet stream isn't moving sideways as quickly as it normally does, and so we're getting long periods of these weather patterns. So that, it's been a cause for concern because of crops and because of the effect on vulnerable people like young children and elderly people and animals, obviously, needing extra care in the really hot weather because they can't regulate their body temperatures and they need extra attention from humans in order to help them through it. But one of the positive things that comes out of prolonged dry periods are the parch marks that show up in fields. And so we've had such prolonged dry weather across the whole of the southern UK and Ireland, and even in Scotland, but particularly in Wales and the south of England and in southern Ireland. We've had such warm weather for such a prolonged period of time that we've got some really interesting landmarks that we didn't know existed have suddenly started appearing. And it's partly because of the rise in drones that we have more amateur photographers sending drones up and making aerial shots of fields, that we're actually discovering an awful lot more ancient monuments in the landscape. And in particular, the Royal Commission so it's the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales have discovered a medieval castle at Castle Llwyn Gwynau in Tregaron, I think that's in Monmouthshire, which I'll put some photos in to show you the floor plans that are showing up. At Gaia Fawr Iron Age fort, there has been more evidence of the actual settlements within the fort area and surrounding the fort area. The fort itself is well known because, as I've shown you on some of my Rambling On episodes and the Vlogtober episodes, Iron Age hill forts are usually quite monumental and on the top of hills, so they're usually quite easy to see. But the actual where people lived and the temporary structures that might be put up inside the hill forts for festivals and ceremonies and so on, they really are so ephemeral that they don't show up unless you strike lucky and happen to dig in the right place, except when you have this parched weather. Because what happens is that if you have a ditch dug that's then filled in, the soil in the ditch is usually less dense than the soil around, and so it retains water more easily. And so you tend to have much greener areas where there are ditch lines. And then where there might be stone or other rubble from buildings, that tends to be more dense than the surrounding area. And so it holds less water than the surrounding area. And so you get a much more defined parched line in those areas. So you can tell where ditches and walls might have been in former times based upon whether or not they are still lush and green when everything else is yellow, or whether they're much more yellow than the surrounding area. There have been a number of there's been an Iron Age and Roman settlement discovered at Trwyn in Wales. These are all Welsh. And in the Vale of Glamorgan, there has been a prehistoric enclosure discovered. But probably the most important discovery is at Newgrange in Ireland. Newgrange is already well known and famous for its passage tomb. And it's quite a monumental structure, and it's beautiful to see. It reminds me of the Long Barrow that I took you to at Wayland Smithy. It's that kind of monumental prehistoric structure. Probably Iron Age, but possibly Neolithic into the Bronze Age even. So, but what's really interesting is that right next to this burial chamber is the parch mark showing a clear henge, which will probably be of the same antiquity as Woodhenge and Stonehenge in Salisbury, which are world famous UNESCO World Heritage Sites, as I'm sure you're aware. So, you know, although there are difficulties around this kind of hot weather, it does provide a boon to the archaeological and historical monuments societies that they can actually see a lot more of what is in the ground without actually having to dig. And it really helps us to understand our prehistoric landscape in much more detail without going to all the expense of the digging that just to confirm what's there. But equally, it provides new targets for archaeological digs in order to maybe discover sites that we had no idea were there, or a more ancient site than in a place that we didn't know had existed, or even to see continuity of use, because you move from the barrow structures of the Neolithic and the Bronze Age through the roundhouse enclosures of the Iron Age into the square enclosures of the Roman Age, and then the village layouts of the medieval period. And the difference in shapes and sizes really give archaeologists a good idea as to what kind of settlement it was and what time the settlement was. And it can actually show when a settlement went out of use, or the continuity of settlement in a particular place. So it's been a real boon for archaeologists. But the other thing that this hot weather has kind of illustrated is, well, I mean, not illustrated, the notable thing about this hot weather has been the crystal blue skies that we have been enjoying. And there are a few cumulus clouds out there at the moment, but it is a beautiful, deep blue sky up in the air. And this got me to thinking about blue, because blue is an interesting colour in nature. Blue skies exist because the blue colour, the length of the waves of blue light are at the short end of the spectrum. So when the light hits the atmosphere, the blue light is scattered more because it's shorter light waves, lengths. And so the sky looks blue, even though it isn't blue, it's just the blue light is scattered more than all the other wavelengths of light. And this got me to thinking, because blue in nature, apart from the sky, really is a very difficult colour for plants and animals to create. Mostly the reason for this is because most chemicals absorb shorter wavelengths of light, which means that blue is mostly absorbed into most chemicals. And so whereas different types of, for example, we know that flamingos are pink because of the blue-green algae and the shrimp that they eat, which dyes their feathers effectively that pink colour. And you could see that effect yourself. If you ate a lot of carrots, and I mean a lot of carrots, nothing but carrots all the time, then the whites of your eyes would take on this slightly pink tinge as well, because of the carotenoids that you would be eating. But blue doesn't work like that. Blue is absorbed by most chemicals. So in order to get blue to appear to our eyes, what they would actually... This is all partly the complicated thing about colour. The colour that you see something as is the colour that it doesn't absorb. So if you see something pink, it's because it's absorbing all of the non-pink light waves. And so what's being reflected back at you is the pink. And so to see something blue, what you need to do is absorb all, if you like, the orange end of the spectrum light waves, and that would then reflect back the blue. But the problem is that most chemicals absorb the short wavelengths, which are the blue end of the spectrum, the ultraviolets and the indigos and the violets and the blues. And so it's actually very difficult to get a naturally occurring pigment of blue in nature. And in fact, there is only one species of butterfly that is thought to actually have blue pigment. So the blue of my eyes, the blue of most butterflies, and particularly the blue morpho butterfly. And I'll put a picture of the blue morpho butterfly in here, which is famous because it's one of the two butterflies that's used as the butterfly emojis in Google and iTunes and all the rest of it. It's the structure of the cells that make blue colour appear. And we know this is the case because, for example, green, which is a mixture of yellow and blue, in order for an animal to create a green colour in its body, it actually has to produce structures that produce blue and a pigment of yellow. So if you see a green snake, for example, it's actually got yellow pigment and blue structures in its body. And we know this for certain because when they die, the yellow pigment fades and you're left with a blue snake. And the most famous example of this is a 50 million year old beetle carcass that was found in Germany, which is still to this day bright blue. And this applies to things like peacock feathers, the colour of blue eyes, the colour of blue birds and blue butterflies. There are very few animals in nature that have actually got blue pigmentation. In fact, there are no vertebrates at all with actually blue pigmentation, and as far as we're aware, there is only one butterfly that actually has a blue stripe, which is from pigment rather than from structure, and that is the olive-wing butterfly, and I'll put a picture in here of that. So I think the message from all of that is that whilst we enjoy the brightness of colours and the vividness of blues in the sky and in the sea and all around us, we should perhaps also be aware that things are not always what they appear to be. Now, before I go, I popped into town. I had to go into town and I popped into Willow's and I bought myself a card for my niece. It's a rather pretty, in fact I'll take it out of the plastic envelope and then you can see it better. It's this rather pretty knitted jumper with a little bit of wool here, as you can see. So that's I'll be sending that off to her to congratulate her on the birth of her son. I also wanted to talk about a make-along that I'm going to be hosting. The second make-along of the summer, so I think we'll call it that. We'll call it the second make-along of summer. And this is a make-along so you can knit or crochet or sew or anything that takes your fancy. And I think I was talking with Wendy about this last week, and I think the theme of the make-along is going to be the beach. So it can be colours that remind you of going to the seaside or sitting on a beach on the hot summer dog days of summer. Ice creams, deck chairs, donkeys, the sky with clouds, anything at all that reminds you of the beach. And I'm going to run this throughout the whole of the summer now. So I'm going to run it from, well, I was going to say the 1st of August, but that was yesterday, right the way through until the 30th of September. So you have 2 months to make things. I will put together some prizes again for the winner, and with a bit of luck I may even have 2 winners. So very much worth your while taking part. And as I say, it's open to anybody. I'll open up a chatter thread and a finished objects thread on the Ravelry group. The link will be down below in the description. And that's pretty much it. So I think until next time, stay happy, stay well, stay safe, and keep crafting. So bye.